action.
Yeah, we're just wrapping up from a news conference with law enforcement, a lot of solemn faces out there, an official with the State Fair and a communications person with the Department of Labor. What has happened at the State Fair tonight is the unthinkable, the thing that you most want not to happen. It has happened. There was some kind of malfunction of a ride called the Vortex. We're going to be able to show you video of that. And if you're just coming into this newscast, 5 people were hurt when something went wrong with that ride. We are getting a lot of information into the newsroom tonight, and we'd like to begin our coverage now of what we've been able to get and gather and document news-wise.
Let's start with Trip Atkinson. He was actually at the fair at the time.
Trip, how soon before you began to see emergency medical people arrive there on the scene to administer aid, or were people who actually work for the fair there to help out the victims?
Well, immediately there were people there like trying to give care, and then EMS, like ambulances, about 3 or 4 of them came there probably within the next 3 minutes, and they took them off on stretchers, and it didn't look like they were responsive at all.
You know, this is one of the busiest days crowd-wise for the fair. It's when people can get in free, bringing in a certain number of cans. Can you talk about how crowded the scene was? I mean, how were they able to manage crowd control, Trip?
They got fences and golf carts, and they were pushing people back to get the whole area blocked off for the EMS.
Well, you take care of yourself, young man, because you have really been through a lot that many people could conceive as being traumatizing, but we appreciate you being so clear in helping us understand what happened moments after that accident.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Trip Atkinson on the phone there, 17-year-old who was very near the accident. Meanwhile, as we continue to gather information, and again, we've got 5 folks injured, 2 of them seriously from a ride called the Vortex, the smaller one at the State Fair.
Yeah.
Pam, meanwhile, you spent some time talking to someone who'd been at the fair during the day.
Yeah, I talked with a man who was near the scene of that ride. He didn't actually see the accident, but Ken Vrana told me he did see the ride operator having one heck of a time locking down the safety bars on the Vortex.
Well, we were out, my wife and I were out at the fair taking some photographs, and just happened to be in front of that particular ride, and I was waiting for them to start the ride so I could get some action stuff. And it's a little bit unusual ride in terms of the way they have to lock people in with one of these bars. And they kept messing with the bars and messing with them, and they couldn't seem to get the thing to lock down. And I got a little bit bored of waiting because I didn't, we were going to move on. And they still ultimately could not get them to lock down, but they started running that ride, and they ran it from 8:45 until the accident. So they knew there was a problem with that ride.
There he is. He says they had to have known there was a problem with that ride. This investigation is really just getting started. The sheriff said that. So the story we hear, it may keep changing, and witnesses' statements could very well change between now and in the morning. But we want to talk to somebody who's right there on the scene.
Yeah, Derek Waller from our reporting team is out there. He has been for several hours.
Again, a tragic evening here at the State Fair, but certainly a lot of unanswered questions about what exactly happened. I'm live at the State Fair. I'm Derek Waller, WNCN News. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Derek, thank you for all that information. And just to recap one more time, an injury at the Vortex ride in the Old Midway. That's the yellow ride. Some reports saying it could have been as high as 20 feet above the ground. 5 people injured, 2 of them in serious condition, we believe, at this point.
The ages ranging from 14 to 39 years old. And again, as Derek alluded to, it doesn't appear that this accident is going to shut down the State Fair. We know it is a huge moneymaker for our state, and he said he wants families to still come out and have fun. Granted, that could change between now and then, but as far as we're able to determine right here and right now, the fair will continue to operate as usual tomorrow, and we're coming right back after this.
When it's your job to see to the care and well-being of more than 150,000 men, women, and children, the total military family at Fort Bragg, you take pains to try and bring care that is outstanding. That's Colonel Frank Christopher's job at Womack Army Medical Center. Meeting the needs of wounded soldiers is testing him.
I think the biggest challenge that we face is that unlike a majority of what the military does, there is no single cookie-cutter recipe-like solution. For example, our Warriors in Transition Battalion right now has 450 soldiers in it. That's 450 individualized treatment plans that are constructed from the primary care manager to the nurse case managers to the squad leaders to individualize care for each one of those soldiers, because that's what each one of them has earned and deserves.
It's good. I can say it's a lot better than I thought, because everyone hears all the horror stories about how we don't get treatment and they're treating us bad. That's not true.
Sergeant Stan Roberts was severely injured 4 years ago in Iraq. The highly decorated Marine lost most of his right leg when a roadside bomb struck his vehicle. He calls his injury an inconvenience.
I lost my right leg. Okay, so what? So, doesn't mean I can't work. Doesn't mean I can't get back out there. Doesn't mean I can't be a productive member of society. And I want my children to understand that when you have a difficult situation placed in front of you, the best choice is to push through it.
He says newly injured warriors can push through it too. It takes some time navigating all the services that offer support out there. Sergeant Roberts says sometimes that will mean pushing through the advice of doctors. You want to get people to hear you, to really hear you when you talk about your situation.
I think people tend to think that because they've seen a lot of different injuries that, you're saying, hey, this isn't working for me, I don't know about this, and they say, oh, no. No, really, I know you understand things, but I understand what's going on with myself, and when I tell you something, that's what I mean. If I'm telling you this hurts, it's not because, oh, woe is me, I want more meds. It hurts.
Pain around his leg is still a constant in his life. Sergeant Roberts says he accepts it. What he can't accept, he says, is the stigma that still exists around the signature wound of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, traumatic brain injury. Colonel Christopher says early treatment reduces further damage.
Now we're encouraging our soldiers and our veterans to come forward to ask for help, for their buddies and our comrades in arms, to identify when the soldier to their left or to their right isn't themselves or isn't doing something normally.
Army medic, Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez was one of the elite soldiers in the military. At the point of the spear in the war in Afghanistan, he was in a special forces unit, and his team's tempo during operations was relentless. In 2006, Sergeant Rodriguez suffered a traumatic brain injury from a roadside bomb. It took a while before he was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He didn't want to admit it.
And about 2 years ago, it got to a point where he could no longer hide it. When he'd been wearing hearing aids already for years, but his balance became an issue, and the seizures became more prevalent. His speech became stuttered, and he couldn't think of his words.
Rodriguez's wife, Kelly, is in the military herself, and she says even with her background, she was confused.
The biggest thing for me was just being frustrated. I didn't know what to do to help him. I didn't know, there was nothing I could do to help him. I didn't know what to say. I'm a medic in the Army too, but I couldn't treat that. I didn't know.
She did know enough to start calling for help. Her husband received most of his care at Walter Reed Army Hospital in Maryland.
They were pretty upfront. There isn't necessarily a cure for any, for brain injury. There isn't a cure for PTSD. There is just treatments, and there's ways to cope, and there's ways to adapt. And he was doing that before he got a diagnosis. He's just figures out new ways to do things.
Her husband's brain is different now. He no longer functions the same way. To Rodriguez, despite new attention, brain injuries are still discounted, overlooked.
They should not have to prove, they should not have to explain their injury. They should just, all they say is, I got a brain injury. Why should they be questioned? And I think that's the most important thing, I think, is that people don't need to just talk about it. They need to really recognize it and understand it.
Despite his many obstacles, Sergeant Rodriguez told me he regrets nothing, and that if he could stay in the Army and deploy tomorrow, he would. I really wasn't expecting him to talk. His wife told me he was joining us outside to support her. That's all. Sergeant Rodriguez said, if nothing else, I needed to put this in the story about his brain injury and recovery.
I'm not a victim, she said it, but I'll never stop fighting. Whether it's fighting for the country or fighting for my family or fighting for myself, I would never stop fighting. I've fought my whole life, so why stop now?
In about 6 months' time, these father and son walks are going to end for Wayne Daniels and his son Brandon. I could hear some of their conversation while recording. I could see it was important for Daniels to let his son know where he stands on things and what he believes. In March, Brandon will be heading to Paris Island, South Carolina for boot camp. He's 19 years old.
Well, I listened to Marines because I want to be one of the first ones that get sent over just in case something else happens like 9/11. I've had a lot of friends and family that's inspired me.
There is a family history of military service. This is a picture of Brandon's great-grandfather. He fought in World War II. This jacket belonged to him. These are his medals. And that's him there with his squadron. And here's Brandon's dad. He served in the Army just before Desert Storm.
And I want to continue that line going. And I've been talking to my little brothers and my nephews, and I'll try to get it carried on.
Brandon knows what's going on in Afghanistan and more recently about the anti-U.S. hostilities in the Mideast.
I still strongly, it makes me want to go more. I wish I can get it at an earlier date so that way I can get over there sooner.
And what of the new casualties of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the increasing number of service members suffering brain injuries?
It affects my decision a little, knowing that I might encounter that, but I will seek help if I start suffering in those type of problems.
You bet his dad's worried, but supportive.
I support him 110%. I'm proud. I don't know if he knows it or not, and I think he does, but I'm really proud of him. And I want him to be safe. I feel honored.
What do you think will be the last thing you want him to hear in his ear from you when he's gone?
That I love him, and I want him to come home in one piece, and I'll be here for him.
I was feeling symptoms of emotional pain to a point where it literally, in my case, manifested itself as physical pain.
Master Sergeant Eric Brooks says he thought about suicide as a way to stop his pain in 2004.
But that had to take a lot of strength to say, hey, I need help.
I was terrified.
After 2 deployments to Iraq, Brooks worried that if he asked for counseling, his military career would be over.
It was my anxiety and my unwillingness to fail that helped me, believe it or not, survive.
Turns out Brooks got the help he needed, and now he trains other soldiers to spot suicidal symptoms like depression and anxiety.
Then I'm going to make it my personal mission to help everyone else.
8 years later, Brooks says his military career has flourished, and he helps other soldiers through some of their darkest times.
If you have not yet developed the personal courage to ask for help, then ask for hope. Because sometimes hope is the only weapon that we have against the fear of the unknown.
I couldn't help but be touched by the relationship between Michael and Kelly Rodriguez in Fayetteville. Michael is a Special Forces medic who suffered a traumatic brain injury in 2006. Kelly stood by him through his struggles to walk, speak, and sleep. Lesson 1, the power of love. The sergeant's brain may be different, but this Army wife and soldier says his core, his heart, they're the same as when they met in Afghanistan.
The one thing that stuck out in my mind with him was him talking about Antonio and Diego, his older, or our older boys. But I said, wow, he really loves his kids. He's awesome. And that's one thing that stuck out to me. And then when I saw him with the boys, we got married a week later.
Lesson 2, doctors at Womack Army Hospital, like many military hospitals, use new technologies and run programs now that were never dreamed of when the war in Afghanistan began 11 years ago.
That includes neurologists, neuro-ophthalmologists, behavioral health professionals, occupational therapists, using everything from standard psychotherapy all the way up through virtual reality treatment for both traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and other behavioral health disorders.
Lesson 3, the effects of a winning attitude. Sergeant Stan Roberts served 3 tours of duty in Iraq. He lost his right leg, injuries to his right arm, and post-traumatic stress disorder. After 3 years of treatment, he returned to his family in Fuquay-Varina and worked hard to get his life back.
The best choice is to push through it, and to and to conquer it. So, like I said, there are certain things I'll never be able to do. I'll never be able to run through the park, with my children or anything like that. But at the same time, I have no problem sitting in here on the floor and wrestling around with them.
One more, lesson 4, is going to take a village to create a better future for all of our warriors as they return home.
It's the entire community enveloping that person when they come home and wanting them to be reintegrated in that community so they do feel like they have a purpose in life again. And it will benefit every community. A lot of communities will benefit from these guys and women coming home.
You say that with a lot of confidence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see it every day.